Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what's up, bro?
Not too much, brother. Today we're going to be chatting about Trudeau spending $30 million on diversity consultants to enforce DEI, a survey finding that 55% of Canadians say the public education system is going the wrong way, Canadians fleeing big cities for affordable living, the Foreign Interference Commissioner saying that Liberals are withholding key documents, the Liberals borrowing heavily without locking in at low rates, which will cost Canadians billions, the Liberals spending $443 million to solve homelessness, which got 20% worse, and the WHO director calling for radical overhaul of global economy and agriculture. However, if before we get into things, you wouldn't mind leaving us a kind review on Spotify or subscribing to our YouTube channel wherever you're watching, that is greatly appreciated. All right, let's get started. All right, so first off, we've got Trudeau spending $30 million on diversity consultants to enforce DEI. Since 2019, Canadian taxpayers have been billed over $30 million to enrich diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants across all federal departments. Government contracts reveal a network of consultants promoting gender ideology, systemic racism theory, and other controversial ideas. Ottawa's spending includes contracts for sex change seminars at the Veterans Review and Appeal Board, pipe ceremonies at Correctional Service Canada, Indigenous cooking and beadworking lessons, and a batch of transgender pride flags. The largest recipient of DEI spending was the Department of National Defence, or D&D, with the Liberal government allocating $9,326,278 to reform the Canadian military with DEI ideology. So, is this a justifiable use of Canadian taxpayer funds?
Absolutely not. I mean, look, forcing ideological dogma into the business world or into the military or into any of these organizations, first of all, it shouldn't be happening. Second of all, it should not be costing taxpayer dollars. There's just no way. I mean, not to mention, like, DEI initiatives inadvertently create a new bias, right? I mean, you can't possibly favor someone for their culture, skin color, or sexual preference without discriminating against someone else, right? So it's like, Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And I just think this has gotten so far out of hand. And when you look at what they're doing to the military, that's the last place this stuff should exist. You've already got people that have committed their lives to the country. And the whole purpose of being not the whole purpose, I shouldn't say it, that the purpose is to defend the nation. But the way that they do it, and the way that they do it effectively, is by creating a community, like a family. And like you see guys in the military, and they're the best of friends 20, 30 years down the road. You create a bond with these people because you're willing to put your life on the line. You have to depend on them for that purpose. That is kind of the fabric with which that very much ties the military together. But when you throw DEI into it, all you do is you just rip that apart, because everyone has to walk on eggshells around being worried about offending someone, or is it equitable, or all this other weird stuff. Like, that's the last place this stuff should exist. It's I'm not articulating it very well, but I think it's a really big problem. And I think the rest of the world is kind of laughing at the West right now and how they're managing their military and allowing this stuff to sort of infiltrate it. That being said, I do believe that if an organization wants to prioritize this nonsense, feel free. Like, 100% do your thing. Just don't push your ideology on me and, keep this crap out of the military.
I was listening to a podcast recently with a girl named Kelsey Sharon, who was phenomenal. She was on Jordan Peterson's podcast. And she is a veteran of the Canadian military. And even she was saying, like, this stuff is going way too far. She mentioned that she does believe that, say, women have a place within the military. So, for instance, when it was coming to them going around in the Middle East and searching homes and such for contraband and weapons from the Taliban, where they were trying to crack down on them, she was saying it is good that there was a female there, so that, when they're searching females, there should be somebody there to make sure that those women aren't being assaulted in that process. And then, but on the battlefield front, she was like, now we're getting into the mode of sending women into combat, and like, you're not only putting her in danger, but you're putting every other soldier in danger, because now, one, those soldiers kind of have this in the back of their head, like, I need to look out for this person a little bit more than they might have to with a full male. And then also, if, let's say, a male goes down, like she's 130 pounds, maybe max, she's like low 5 foot, and she was even saying like, you expect me to be able to carry a wounded soldier out over my shoulders in a crossfire? Like, there's zero chance. So now you're also risking their life in that sense. Also, there's just a disgusting kind of bend to it with, it's like, how are you telling me that pushing women into a future where they have equal access to being sent into a meat grinder to fight for essentially political reasons? I mean, when was the last moral entry into a war? It's very hard to find one.
Agreed.
So you're like, okay, we're allowing good people to die for bad causes, and that's pro women. You're like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, it's funny. The last time I think there was a good moral cause for a war, it was a civil war, unfortunately. But I agree. The military is kind of like a firefighter. Like, look, your job is to put out the fire and carry people out of a building. How many can you carry? Oh, 0? Like when you look at the military, it's like a lot of these things, like being a firefighter. I genuinely think, if you're going to be run to be a firefighter, they're doing a lot of DEI stuff in that space. You should be a number, not a name, not a picture, a number. Execute your job. Okay, everything's objective. Can you do these tasks? Hey, these are the top 10 people that did these tasks. I don't care what color they are. I don't care about their sexual preference. I don't care where they're from. Those are the 10 people. They're like, nope, we have to pick these 10 so that it's more equitable. But look, when I'm burning to death, this is what I care about.
Yeah.
And when it's the military and it comes to fighting for your lives and fighting for your country, you care about the same things. But to your point, there is a place for women in the military for sure. And I don't even care if it's on the battlefield, if you can pull your weight. But all this other DEI crap, like there's no room for it in this space. Not at all. And look, people will say, well, Jonathan, women are getting raped and bad things are happening in the military. I'm not condoning that. Stop all that shit. Kick those guys out of the military. That stuff's not okay. But this DEI crap has nothing to do with that. What you're doing is you're pointing at another problem and you're basically straw manning it. Don't do that. This stuff's ridiculous and it doesn't belong in this space.
And, again, it sounds like I'm just banging my head against a wall here, but it is very important to recognize that this DEI stuff is just repackaged Marxism. The concept of Marxism is that any inequality along class lines is immediate evidence of oppression or injustice, and our modern social justice activists have just taken that idea a little bit further and said that it's certain identity markers, whether you're woman, gay, black, whatever it be, is then determines your class position. And therefore, again, any inequality along these identity markers is immediate evidence of oppression. And so their whole goal is, well, if we want to get rid of oppression, then we need equal representation around everything, right? And it's really interesting because we've talked about it on this podcast a lot about how we believe that our governments are kind of shifting more towards this socialism idea. But I was recently reading a book by a guy named, I forget his first name, but his last name's Burnham, and he calls it the Managerial Revolution. And I think he's actually very spot on. Now, it's important to note that he was actually quite pro this, so he was kind of arguing in a sense for it. But this is how the idea goes, is capitalism is disappearing, but socialism is not replacing it. What is now arising is a new kind of planned, centralized society, which will be neither capitalist nor, in any sense of the word, democratic. The rulers of this new society will be administrators. These people will eliminate the old capitalist class, crush the working class, and organize society so that all power and economic privilege remain in their own hands. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this, with whether it be the DEI stuff, any of these sort of ideas, is it's administrators, it's these third parties like getting their way into all of the means of production, so to speak, whether it be businesses, like, I mean, you see corporate, top 500 companies kind of thing, routinely putting these DEI programs on, or governments are doing it. And so it is like these administrators, it's almost like rule by administrators now.
Yeah, so this is actually a symptom of big government. So the bigger the government gets, like you look, all they do is they become a group of ruling administrators, right? So, there's sort of a changing of the guard at the top, but the people that run the country, like the federal government in the United States is the largest corporation in the world. They have millions of employees, right? And as you continue to expand that, you secure sort of the network. The larger it gets, the harder it is to fall. And that's exactly what's happening, is you have this administrative class that are running these Western governments. That's exactly what's already kind of happening in the direction we're going. And the reason that they want to continue to politicize things is so they can continue to expand, right? And like we've seen with Trudeau, the direct federal workforce has increased by over 100,000 now, which is about a 40% increase from what it was before him. And you're seeing the same thing in the States. It's like the only sector that's really seeing job growth is the public sector, right? And this stands to reason. It all kind of tracks. And I think this DEI spending, to your point, is it should be highlighted as a big issue, because when you do kind of cut through the fat, it is basically a Marxist agenda that we're funding with taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and it's ideological, quote unquote, re-education, right? It's okay.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's wild.
Which actually leads us into our next topic nicely here, which is a survey finding that 55% of Canadians say the public education system is going the wrong way. A recent survey conducted by secondstreet.org has sparked concern among school boards and provincial governments in Canada. The study revealed widespread dissatisfaction among Canadians regarding various aspects of the education system. Key concerns highlighted by respondents included discipline and accountability, curriculum priorities, and teaching methods. An overwhelming 82% of participants identified discipline and accountability as a significant issue. Additionally, 74% expressed concern about school curriculum and lessons priorities, while 60% cited problems with new teaching methods. The survey also revealed dissatisfaction with what was being taught in classrooms, with 50% of respondents feeling that schools are failing to prioritize essential skills. Content related to sexual education and gender was flagged by 43% of participants. So, can we save the education system, or are we going to continue watching this institution crumble?
So it's definitely going to continue to crumble because it's ideologically captured, right? So I see this more like an apple rather than a window. You can repair a window, but you can't save a rotten apple. More anecdotally, like, I won't be putting my kids in the education system the way it is today. I don't believe in it, and like you said, it is riddled with all of these issues that I don't support. Like, when you remember public school, it was playing in the sand, picking your nose, throwing crayons in the light, which I used to do when I was in grade 2. I don't know why that one came back to me. But that's what you remember. You remember you learned the alphabet and simple things about numbers, and you got picked on and that kind of stuff. You didn't choose your gender. You didn't do that stuff. The teachers didn't try to convince you that they're a more important authority figure than your parents. That wasn't the kind of stuff that happened. You know what I mean? And that's where it's going, and that's where it is, actually. It's not where it's going. So there's no chance that I'm putting my kids into this education system. But the benefit is there are a lot better alternatives that are coming out right now. And there's we talked about this before, there's very much like a parallel education system kind of growing alongside it. And you're seeing a lot in the States where there's more affordable private schools because parents are kind of banding together and kind of creating these smaller, I would actually almost like large homeschool. You know, there's like 20, 30 kids and they're all being homeschooled by maybe 1 or 2 teachers they hired or something like that. So that's one sort of solution. Or, you know, you get Tim Kennedy in the States, who's got his school down in Texas, and it's great. The kids spend half the time outside learning to like live in the wilderness or plant their food or how to, you know, raise chickens or whatever it is. There's a lot of practical skills you can learn doing that. So for me, that's kind of where I see things going, because I don't think that our education system can be saved, and I don't think it's worth saving. Now, the nice thing is when you build this parallel economy, eventually it's going to become a strong competitor. And I think at that point, maybe it'll either fall or they'll have to find a way to kind of rework things.
Well, even the president of secondstreet.org, the people that did that survey, Colin Craig, he urged officials to address these issues and consider offering greater choice outside the government-run system. So even the people that were taking the survey thought that, yes, we should have alternatives to state schooling rather than trying to just fix state schooling. And I think once you start understanding that public education operates solely as essentially indoctrination camps, then you cannot unsee them that way as well, right? And that means that they can become very dangerous if they're captured, and they frequently are. I mean, even, right, Vladimir Lenin said, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted."
That's dark.
Yeah. So the ruling classes, I mean, and this was very common within Marxism, very like across the board, was the idea of like indoctrination through education. But even going back to this DEI thing where we were talking about in the last topic, how these administrators are ideologically possessed and they are forcing this ideology through things like the Department of National Defense in Canada and so on. Well, this is the exact same ideology that the administrators of public schools are operating on as well. So actually, there was just something breaking that I saw today about there was a grade 3 course at the Peel Board where they posed the question, what does the word privilege mean? Do you have privilege? Write the answers on your sticky note. And then there was pictures of these sticky notes that kids put up. And it says, this is obviously, a grade 3 writing this. Privilege means when something is easier, like white people have more privilege than black people. Then there was another one. Privilege means when someone is easiest for someone else. For example, someone is white. Therefore,
wow,
you're white. Your life is easy.
You know what's so terrible about this stuff? When you were young, when I was a kid growing up, none of this stuff existed. You don't even think about it. You see those. I've seen it on social media. Small kid, little white kid, little black kid. It's his twin brother. They're best friends. They don't even see the difference. They have no idea. You're baking this into them as a problem now.
100%.
You're creating the issue. All you're doing is making it worse. All we're doing is regressing. And I can't figure out what the value of that is.
Yeah. Well, and I love that Morgan Freeman clip on it. Actually, here. Have you ever heard his take on Black History Month?
Maybe.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. And so again, I think he's exactly right. What have we seen? The more that this ideology becomes pervasive in all of our institutions, the more actual conflict there is between these groups. The worse it gets. And so going back to the whole thing about public school system being essentially indoctrination, the best takedown, and it put everything I've ever felt about state education into words, was John Stuart Mill, who is one of the foundational liberal philosophers. Like when you look at the concept of liberalism in the West, John Stuart Mill was a foundational thinker in that regard. So he said, by trying to create a universal education, you immediately open the never-ending argument of what the state should teach and how it should teach, which turns the subject of this education into a battlefield for groups and political parties. This creates the scenario where the time and labor which should have been spent in educating ends up getting wasted arguing about education. If the government wants every child to receive a good education, it has a better chance of achieving this goal by not providing one. We need to be able to distinguish between the state enforcing a requirement of education and the state taking upon itself to provide that education. These are two totally different concepts. Individuality is extremely important, as well as the diversity of opinions and modes of conduct that it provides. However, this diversity of individuals is only possible with a diversity of education. A state education will inevitably lead to molding people to be exactly like one another. The shape which they are molded into will be that which pleases the predominant power, whether that be a monarch, a priesthood, an aristocracy, or the majority of the existing generation. State-provided education would allow the ruling class to establish a despotism over the mind, which will inevitably lead to one over the body.
That's exactly what's happened.
100%.
Yeah.
It's just complete atomization, and there's no individual freedom of thought anymore. There's no diversity of thought. You come out of these
there's no interest-based learning either. A lot of people that I know that do homeschooling or do some sort of alternative education, they do interest-based learning. It's like, okay, you're interested in something in the forest. Okay, great. So let's break that down. Let's understand. Okay, like one of my buddy's kids, he's really interested. So they spend a lot of time in the woods. So they find plants. Okay, what can this plant do? What can it heal? How can you use this plant? So that's kind of the process they go through. They find a way to take interest and they back it into STEM learning.
Yeah.
So it's just like that's kids, when you're 5, 7, 10, like what you're learning at that age is not really that important. It's more about you're learning sort of how to be educated, but at the same time, you're going to do a lot better if you're interested in what you're learning. You're also finding out a lot about yourself. You're either auditory, kinesthetic, or visual, and you kind of figure that out along the way because, my wife actually mentioned this, like a very small, like a single-digit percentage of kids learn best in a classroom setting. It's just not the way that people learn. So, you jam these people into these institutions. Yeah, like you said, you make them like ideological war camps. And then you just create a subservient society. I'm definitely in that 55% that thinks that the education system is going the wrong way. And honestly, I don't think we should even try to save it.
The idea that a kid in Quebec should be learning the same things as a kid in a rural area in Alberta, when those two have completely different life options in front of them in environments and things to interact with, then like the fact that those two kids should receive a very similar, if not exact same education, it's like you're just hindering both of them for sure.
I totally agree.
All right. Story number 3 for the day. We've got Canadians fleeing big cities for affordable living. According to Statistics Canada, Canadians are leaving the country's priciest cities in search of affordable housing in cheaper regions. Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver lost 93,000, 20,000, and 18,000 residents, respectively, to other cities within their provinces. Housing affordability in Canada reached an all-time low in April. In Vancouver, households needed to spend 106.3% of their income to cover home ownership costs, while in Toronto, it was 84.8%. In Alberta, home ownership costs have risen but remain relatively affordable. In Edmonton, only 36.8% of income is needed for home ownership costs, while Calgary requires 48.3%. Regina homeowners need just 30.4% of their income, bested only by St. John's at 28.7%. So, is it time for people to escape the cities?
Yeah, I mean, especially the high cost ones like out in Vancouver and in Toronto. I mean, yeah, get out before they burn to the ground. Like we're moving out to the Caledon area, right? Like the big city doesn't really make any sense anymore. And, I think part of it is like a natural progression through life. I think, when you're young, you want to be in the city, you want to be in the mix. And as you get older, it's just kind of like this, the attrition rate just continues to rise. People just want to get out. You know what I mean? I just think that that's getting expedited and a lot less people actually want to stay in the cities anymore. And sure, cost is a big reason why. But also safety, also ideology. Like you said, you sent me a photo the other day of some guy taking a shit outside your house.
Yeah, I was like,
oh man,
this was
you either get Palestinian chants or you get a guy taking a dump on your doorstep. Like, yeah, get out of the city.
And I live in a good area too. Yeah. I live literally smack downtown Toronto, a 2-minute walk from the government buildings, like in Queen's Park area. And yeah, even too, like you walk around the parks in Toronto now, like go hanging out in a park. There's tents in all of them now. Yeah. Like you can't. And then yeah. So you had texted me asking like, hey, would you be interested in moving to Orangeville? And that's when I sent you that picture. It was just like it's 11 a.m. and I'm currently looking at somebody taking a shit on a sidewalk. Like, yeah, I'll move.
Yeah, I think I've had enough of the city.
I'll move out of the big city.
It's funny, right? Like affordability is one thing, but in general, they're just kind of they're not kind of what they once were. And I know things always change and there's ebbs and flows. So I don't mean that in any sense like, hey, it's so different. But like, even, we were in the Port Credit area and it's a relatively safe area. But even the parks behind us, where we would walk the dogs, like Megan wouldn't go there at night anymore because there were tents in the park. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It just becomes unsafe. Like there's a lot more homeless people. And I'd feel bad for them, but I mean, it feels unsafe. You know what I mean? There's people sleeping in our vestibule, people sleeping in the bank's vestibule. You kind of go, well, it's not really feeling like I want to stick around the area anymore. And not for nothing, like, you look at affordability when it comes to housing, but, my parents all live up in Orillia. So I buy groceries in Toronto, I buy groceries in Orillia. Swear to God, it's 30% cheaper up there. It's wild. Even gas is less money. So I understand, from an affordability perspective, wanting to get out of the city.
Even just in the last 2 weeks alone, I have had my car broken into. I had witnessing people taking a shit in public, and then also too there was just yesterday watching there was a viral moment that went around. Did you see the clip of the guy trying to pull people out of their cars at Dundas, like just east of Yonge and Dundas Square, like 2 blocks over? I can't remember what that street running north is there, but anyways, he was literally trying to pull people out of their cars while they were waiting to turn at the intersection and trying to fight them, started punching their glass windows. When the cars took off, he started trying to hang on to the side of the cars to get into them. And then it got to the point where a fire truck, this went on for like minutes, and like he was trying to just fight everybody. And then a fire truck pulled up to the thing. The guy hops on the side of the fire truck and starts throwing punches through the window at the driver of the fire truck.
Oh my God.
And you're just watching this and you're going like, I don't see anybody taking a serious, especially in the political world, I don't see anybody taking any serious steps to addressing these rising issues. And I don't fear for my life or anything like walking out on a day-to-day basis, but these instances are increasing at a crazy rate.
Yeah, I'd have trouble not fighting the dude. I was just thinking about it while you're saying that. I'm like, would I fight the man? And I think it just depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If he was punching the car and Meg was in the car, she'd probably stop me. She'd be like, no, drive away. If it was just me, I'd probably fight the dude.
Yeah.
But also I'm thinking like, if I just walk into the mall and this crazy ass dude just comes running at me like, yeah, we're gonna dance, bro. This is gonna happen. Or if I see him jumping on a fire truck, I'm like, I'm gonna spike the dude in the middle of the road.
And what's
Fuck it,
crazy?
let's go.
What's crazy is that there will be a large portion of people that would think you're the asshole in that
Oh
situation.
yeah, I don't care about any of those people.
Yeah,
I don't give
no.
a shit.
No,
Yeah,
neither
don't
do
care.
I.
Yeah,
But
no.
that
There's
just,
right and wrong, dude. No, if someone's a menace to society and causing harm and damage, think whatever you want. I'm gonna put that person down. Fuck
yeah,
off.
yeah. Well, and that kind of goes to this again. This is that idea where we can't deal with these people because they're disaffected. Is exactly
He's
coming
punching
out.
a firefighter in the face.
It's coming out of that exact same DEI mentality
Yeah.
that is pervasive through all of our institutions.
It's just so illogical.
Actually, it wasn't even in Canada, but did you see down in the States? I can't remember which state it was, but they just changed it so that the state would have to not refer to people as criminals anymore, but rather as justice-affected individuals.
Oh, you know what actually is what so this happened. I gotta highlight this. I know it's not even the story, but I'm so upset about it. You see just how they're changing the nomenclature around these things and how they're basically reducing all the sentencing and all this stuff and all this catch and release bullshit. You see what they did in Germany the other day?
No.
In Germany, they just made having or distributing child porn a misdemeanor. Yeah.
What?
A misdemeanor charge. Yeah, and it's all about these disaffected pedophiles. Fuck these people. Here's the thing. Child porn, go to jail. Do it again, cut the dude's nuts off. What do you mean a misdemeanor? Here's the thing. This really pisses me off. If you allow this to be a misdemeanor, what does this lead to? Well, this leads to child trafficking and child sexual assault, and this leads to pedophilia. You don't allow this stuff. You stop it dead in its tracks. You don't call it a misdemeanor and feel bad for them. You take them out of society. What the fuck are they doing? So anyway, I wanted to mention that because it really pissed me off.
Like they're probably going to toss that kind of stuff into the same basket as neurodivergence, in the near future. That it's just, and you've seen even to them trying to change it where, oh, we can't even call them pedophiles because that would be demeaning. We need to call them minor attracted persons or MAPs instead. And look,
no,
hey, if this,
I'm 100% against it. Fighting it tooth and nail. There is a part of me. There is one path in my life where I stop what I'm doing and I just go chase down pedophiles and seriously and child traffickers. And that's all I do with like Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
You see what he's doing these days?
No.
He's in Congress trying to push through legislation so that they can basically build a private militia to go hunt these people down. That's where I'm at. Fuck this.
All right, story number 4 for the day. We've got Foreign Interference Commissioner saying that Liberals are withholding key documents. So Justice Hogue, in her interim report on foreign interference in Canadian elections, has criticized the Liberal government for redacting and withholding cabinet documents, which hinders her ability to perform her duties. This criticism follows assurances from Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc that the Commission into Foreign Interference would receive, quote, all relevant cabinet documents, even if some sensitive information couldn't be publicly disclosed. Despite this promise, the government has invoked cabinet confidentiality to withhold and redact certain records, including those from the Privy Council office, which reports directly to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Under pressure from the opposition Conservatives and following a report from a family friend, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau eventually agreed to a public inquiry. During his testimony, Trudeau claimed ignorance, stating he wasn't aware of concerns about Chinese interference in the 2021 elections until after media reports surfaced. He also said he was not aware of China's preference for a liberal minority government. Despite these claims, a recent survey reveals that over half of Canadians believe there has been significant interference from foreign governments in Canadian elections. So, how can this happen? I thought Trudeau made a vow of transparency and accountability to the Canadian public. He wouldn't have possibly ever lied when saying something like that.
It's becoming harder and harder to find a truth versus a lie that's coming out of this man's mouth. It's funny though, even my diehard liberal friends are pissed about this, right? They do not support what's happening. And I think it's clear that we have a very broken system when those in charge of our country also have the power to hold or to not hold themselves accountable by blatantly withholding information, right? Like it's wild. It's kind of like the government is the somehow legal mafia, but I mean Trudeau then I suppose metaphorically needs to get whacked. Like we gotta move on from this guy, right? Because it's tough on Canadians, but what kind of trust do you have in your democracy and in the institutions that we have when this is how the leader gets to operate? You know what I mean? Like it's really, really tough to continue supporting the Canadian government en masse at scale, anything they do because of how their leader behaves. You know what I mean? So it's for me, like I joke saying yes, to get metaphorically whacked, but you need to remove the guy because otherwise, like I don't believe in the need for big government like we have. I'm definitely more of a libertarian. But if you look at where Canada's at, the government is such an intertwined component of our society that we do need it to do the right things, and we do need Canadians to work alongside it for now for things to get better, right? But when you have a leader like this, no one will work with or believe in the government. Like you said, over half the people believe that our elections are completely compromised. So when you have this happening, how do you get society and government to work together, get on the same page, right? So,
and I would be pretty sure that if that other 50% of people saw a very accurate picture of this foreign interference, then they would definitely come alongside and be like, yeah, I think the number, if the information was widespread, I think that number would be 100%, because I don't think you can look at these things and think there isn't widespread issues with our elections. I mean, even this inquiry itself, it's like, okay, so you've got the commissioner saying that yes, certain ridings were influenced by the Chinese Communist Party, but don't worry, that didn't affect the overall outcome of the federal election. But then you've also got that exact same commission saying that they don't have the necessary documents in order to make a decision on these things. So I just look at this and go, okay, like you're admitting that interference was not only present but successful in certain areas, and then also saying that you came to that conclusion despite there being obvious information withheld from you, which you can only assume would have been the more damaging information.
Of course.
So it is safe to say that it is worse than this person would have came to the conclusion.
The reality is these two ideas can't exist together, right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. Like the truth here is that it's inconclusive, except we know that it's bad. That's all. We just don't know how bad.
Yeah.
And we know what we're being told is the tip of the iceberg. That's what we know, right? So, and what was it like? Nearly 90% of the documents or information from the inquiry into the Freedom Convoy was also redacted or blocked or held because of national security.
So 87% of federal records on Freedom Convoy were not disclosed during inquiry. Most federal records related to the Freedom Convoy protest were not disclosed in the 2022 inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act and will remain confidential for years, according to a Privy Council report. Approximately 87% of the 31,000 documents provided to the judicial inquiry are restricted, including over 16,000 classified as secret and 372 as top secret. Released documents reveal false claims by cabinet members about protest violence and police requests for the Emergencies Act.
So, I mean, this is a bigger problem than foreign interference in the election, right? The bigger problem that I would suggest Canadians have is the system in place that we have to hold our politicians accountable. That's actually the real problem. But they've built the system to safeguard themselves. This is the issue we have. It's like the only person that can make the change has the vested interest in it not changing. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they won't do it. You're not going to get some altruistic leader in going, oh, I'm never going to fuck anything up, so I'm just going to change this for the better of the country. It's not going to happen. And this is the bigger problem because they can get away with this stuff like foreign interference, like the Freedom Convoy, like pulling the Emergencies Act. You know what I mean? They're allowed to do these things because they've built this buffer zone for them where they basically can't be held accountable for anything. That's the bigger problem. It's not the one thing, it's the system that they have in place to safeguard them.
Yeah. And to your point about liberals being pissed off about this, about like liberal voters, like I would consider myself I mean, I have this weird thing where I feel like I have all political beliefs and none of them at the same time.
Same.
But like I would lean towards liberalism as a philosophy. Like when I pick up philosophy books, like say from John Stuart Mill, like foundational liberal thinkers, everything in those books I'm reading and going, this makes sense to me. Like if I pick up conservative books from the 1700s and 1800s, I don't actually see that much in line with them. But these ideas have just become completely morphed in like liberalism is the idea that the individual rights are the foremost aim that a government should take. That should be their primary duty, is to enshrine and make sure that individuals have freedom. Well, you look at common day liberals, like the Liberal Party, and you go, everything you're doing is actually literally the antithesis of liberalism.
It's like they changed teams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's interesting because I never really considered myself a conservative before, probably really since Trudeau. To be honest with you, I never really considered myself anything. I feel like I'm very politically agnostic and become more of a libertarian, to be quite honest with you. But since I've really jumped into this stuff, conservative is really the only way to sort of correct course. But if you look at traditional liberalism, it's kind of what it is. It's like the liberals of the 90s are the conservatives today.
Yeah.
But it's just all these zealots that are hanging on to what once was, or the idea that they're being told because there's only one media narrative going out in Canada, because what's our balanced media? What, the National Post?
Yeah.
That's about it, right? So we don't have that. We don't have two sides of the story. So people don't really get to think for themselves because like you've said before, you don't have to, when you limit free speech or you limit alternative media sources, you actually limit free thinking. You don't give people all the information to make decisions for themselves.
So I actually very much agree with, say, the conservative side on a lot of moral issues, but I just don't think that you should have an inherently immoral institution like government be in charge of imposing morality on people.
I agree, totally.
So that's where my more libertarian aspect comes in. And that's actually, in most days, actually probably just full anarchist. But that's that concept where people go, well, okay, you just think then they're just ultimate freedom and there's no right or wrong or anything. And you go, no. Anarchy without a strong, or libertarianism or whatever, without a strong sense of cultural duty and also morality does lead to chaos.
Yes.
But that's where it's like, you need freedom. Freedom and responsibility are simultaneously intertwined. So it's like, I want the freedom that liberals promise, or libertarians or anarchists or whatever on that side of the aisle. But I also want that message of responsibility that comes from the right side of it.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting designation. If you're going to be, you know what I like about being a libertarian in general, like the idea behind it really is, if society were libertarian in general, you have to be a good person. Being libertarian only works if you're a good person. That's what, like, it comes with this sort of this moral obligation of being decent, or it doesn't work. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize. It's like, if you are a libertarian, you're basically condoning decency in humans. You just need more people to jump on that bandwagon, and then you've got a strong society. Otherwise, unfortunately, the alternative is they just depend on governments to sort of, like you said, be that moral balance, which is a total disaster.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got liberals borrowing heavily without locking in at low rates will cost Canadians billions. Canada's debt, now exceeding $1.4 trillion, faces high refinancing costs this year due to shorter-term bonds issued during the pandemic. Critics argue that issuing longer-term bonds earlier, when rates were lower, could have saved taxpayer money. The government plans to refinance $414 billion this year at higher interest rates. While some defend the strategy, saying Canada's strong credit rating justifies it, others estimate potential annual costs of $7 to $10 billion due to missed opportunities to lock in lower rates. So is there any way to steelman the short-term issuing of bonds?
Yeah, so there is, in the same light that you would consider a variable mortgage, right? So if you think that there's an opportunity for the market to be stronger and have lower rates, then yeah, you could justify that sort of short-term idea. The reason I use the variable mortgage, I think it's a little more relatable. However, In this case, the government issued bonds because the economy was suffering and they urgently needed capital, which should have been a clear indication that short-term bonds were not the best option. Much like when the economy is poised to crash, one would not jump into a variable rate mortgage.
So I just want to quickly break down how bonds operate, because you do hear people say all the time about, oh, government, it's free money, whatever, right? So how government spending works in a lot of the time is they'll issue bonds, which is essentially an IOU. It is, hey, I'm going to give you this slip that is a bond, and it says that I am essentially going to take out a loan from you, and then with this much interest in these short-term bonds would be, okay, essentially payment structures of, okay, I'll pay this back within 3 years, and if I don't, the interest will go up on that. Or you could also set different parameters, like the conservatives have been pushing for in this case, which is longer form bonds that like IOUs that don't pick up interest as fast. But so like this idea of, government spending being free, it's like, no, they are essentially borrowing money from future taxpayers.
Yeah, so I think one other thing that's important to sort of identify or highlight or explain for people is what happened through the pandemic. So what happened through the pandemic was people didn't even want to invest in government bonds to help the country out. So at that point, the Bank of Canada and the government kind of get in cahoots with retail banks. And then what happens is, the Canadian government issued $400 billion worth of bonds to retail banks. Retail banks then turned around and immediately sold those at a profit to the Bank of Canada, who essentially bought the bonds through the proxy for more money. And the Bank of Canada did that by printing all of that cash. So the retail banks basically just made a mint by acting as an intermediary between all of that, allowing the government to print all that money and then have an increased capital supply.
Also, like Chrystia Freeland, in regards to this, she said that, well, Canada's credit rating is good, so this is the proof that the government is being financially responsible. And she said, quote, "This is a powerful, independent, objective proof point. A AAA credit rating means Canada's economy is strong and resilient." It's like, no. You are taking the actions that leads to a deterioration in our credit rating. Like, that's like saying, well, okay, I have a good credit rating right now, so that means there's no risk in me taking out extremely risky short-term high-interest loans. You're like, no, that's the direct action that is going to lead you to remove your good credit rating.
It's pretty preposterous to listen to this woman continue to tell us why the economy is in such a good place, considering it's as bad as it's been in decades. It's wild, but she's also highly unqualified. But I appreciate how much confidence she has when she says it's interesting.
Yeah. And then 60% of that debt, which was issued during COVID, was 3 years or under, which is all renewed now at 4 or 5% interest rates instead of being locked in at, say, a 10-year period for 1%. So we're already starting to pay for this. And the country's debt servicing costs, the cost of just paying off the interest that the government owes, will be $54 billion this year and rising to $64.3 billion by the end of this decade. So taxpayers are going to be on the hook for roughly over $50 billion annually just for bad, essentially, loans.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be over 10% of our government spending is going to go to managing debt. And people still think they should vote Liberal.
Yeah.
They've had power for 9 years and look what they've done to this country. There's no good excuse at this point.
Two, you could make an argument that, hey, yeah, okay, maybe putting us into that spending deficit and such is worth it if we're getting a better society for it that is leading to a situation where we can be more prosperous as a country. Sure. But that's not how these things are playing out, because we've even seen it now leading into our next story for the day. Liberals spend $443 million to solve homelessness, but it got 20% worse. So despite the government's annual spending increase to reduce homelessness, the number of homeless people in Canada has grown by 20%, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. The new spending represents a 374% increase compared to previous levels. However, Infrastructure Canada's latest count shows that the number of homeless individuals has risen to just over 34,000 people, a 20% 50% increase since 2018. And additionally, the chronically homeless population has grown by 38% since 2018. The PBO's report, released Wednesday, examines the effectiveness of the government's Reaching Home program, launched in 2018 as part of a broader housing strategy aimed at reducing chronic homelessness by 50%. The PBO estimates that achieving the 50% reduction goal would require an additional $3.5 billion annually, a seven-fold increase in funding. The report also highlighted that some individuals assisted by the program still return to homelessness, while others manage to find housing on their own without federal help. So is the government competent enough to deal with a problem as complex as homelessness?
I mean, clearly they are not, right? And I think one of the things to sort of highlight before I jump into another thought is that homelessness is the result of a lot of bad economic policies for the most part. Sure, there are people that just want to live on the street, and I know there's people suffering from mental health issues that live on the street. I understand that. Putting that aside, because it's not as big a portion as it used to be. It used to be all that. Now it's a lot of people that are getting paychecks that literally live on the street because of bad economic policy, right? I mean, it is incredibly frustrating to see such a massive increase in spending while things only get worse. I mean, a 374% increase in funding should have made a significant dent in homelessness. According to them, a 50% dent, right? Again, this is just another stark reminder of how ineffective our government has become, right? I mean, the fact that achieving the intended reduction would also require a seven-fold increase in funding is another huge red flag, because that suggests that this level of efficiency is acceptable, which obviously it's not, right? I mean, addressing homelessness effectively is going to require a comprehensive approach that involves not just financial resources, but also strategic planning, collaboration, and continuous evaluation of these things. But more importantly, addressing the underlying systemic issues, which unfortunately our current liberal government is creating. So there's no way they're going to solve this problem.
They say we need hundreds of millions of dollars to reduce the chronically homeless by 50%. They spend that $100 millions and chronic homelessness increases by 38%. So it's almost a direct inverse of what they were attempting to do. And so right then and there, you just have to go, okay, you guys are not fit to deal with this problem. And I agree with you that, yes, economic factors do lead to homelessness for sure. But this is where I sit here and go, the government is the last institution that should be looked at to deal with something like homelessness, because it gets to something so much deeper than that. You mentioned the mental health stuff, but again, yeah, even the addiction levels of homeless people, like this is a deep, to me, this is almost more of a spiritual issue than it is an economic issue. I think they both play into factor as well. But this is just the creation of a world where people are just feeling like they want to check out. They're just like, I don't want to live in this network, this rat race. I mean, you even just look at what technology is, let's say, doing to kids' mental health on a low rate, shooting up levels of depression and anxiety. And it's like, what do people do when they're like extremely depressed and anxious? Is they typically turn to things like drugs to alleviate that pressure. And so like we have a society like just completely outside of the economic situation, which is almost turning us all into nihilists on a large form. And so like that, I feel like, is a major issue that needs to be addressed in this, where like getting people to have a sense of meaning and purpose and fulfillment in life again. Otherwise, if you don't have that as a culture, if you don't have like genuine aims and everything just comes down to this materialistic world of collect as many shiny objects as you can, and that's the goal of life, like of course you're going to get to this place.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, it's economic. And I think that's where the government can make these adjustments, or what a good government could do. But yeah, this is a purpose problem, right? Like if you feel like you can't climb the mountain that society has put in front of you because of how dire the situation is, then it's kind of this, well, who gives a fuck then? So I get it. And it's understandable that people are feeling this way. So I definitely see that side. I agree with you. I think it's a good 50-50 of both.
All right, next up, we've got the WHO director calling for a radical overhaul of global economy and agriculture. In a rather dramatic call for change, WHO Director General has urged for a complete transformation of the world economy and agriculture, underscoring that health and well-being extend far beyond hospitals and clinics. Quote, health and well-being are not created primarily in hospitals and clinics, but in the way we eat, live, learn, and work. Ghebreyesus declared that in a official post on X and emphasized that health is everyone's business, not just the health sector's. The WHO's vision for a healthier population includes a radical overhaul of the agriculture section. Ghebreyesus is calling for a move away from meat-based diets towards plant-based ones, highlighting significant health and environmental benefits. Quote, "Our food systems are harming the health of people and the planet. Food systems contribute to over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions and account for almost 1/3 of the global burden of disease," he explained during the WHO 75th Anniversary Health for All initiative. Ghebreyesus insists that transforming food systems is crucial. This transformation is bolstered by the commitment of over 130 countries to the COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate and Health. So, what is more dangerous, climate change or the proposed solutions to climate change?
Currently, the proposed solutions to climate change. Look, I agree that health is everyone's business and that we do lack adequate healthcare worldwide. I think that's pretty clear. I also feel that our food systems are harming a significant portion of people around the world, especially in Western societies. But I don't feel the same way as these people. I think it's primarily ultra-processed foods and sugars that are causing the problems. However, Teddy G and the WHO, in my opinion, they lack relevant experience in global economics to make these statements. And they honestly, there's no way they can possibly grasp the ramifications or the full impact of their proposed agricultural shift. The world, there's just no way they have enough information to know how that would all work together and what that means. While the call for better healthcare has merit, this mostly appears to be the WHO pushing the UN's Agenda 2030, trying to convince people that if we don't follow their rules, humanity won't survive.
And I think it's as simple as looking at, okay, yes, what you were talking about with the agricultural and the economy situation being outside of the realm of WHO, I completely agree with. But even something that was completely within the realm of things that they should have authority on, quote unquote, then look at the COVID pandemic. It's like we spent a couple years with the predominant focus was world health. That was paramount. That was above everything. Screw the economy. Our health throughout this pandemic is the top value. Everybody's health got worse.
Everybody's.
Mental health and physical health. So it's that simple. Like within your realm of things that you should have expertise on, you made it worse. So why would we extend that out to now agricultural practices and economic practices?
It makes no sense at all. It's very similar to like what we were talking about earlier with the liberals and how they're managing homelessness. Well, you got the money, but you're the one that created the problem and it's getting a lot worse under your control. So you don't get to do this anymore. Same with these people. You had health. That was your thing. Well, you totally fucked that up. So you don't get to touch the economy or agriculture either. What's crazy though, is that the world is now looking at signing this pandemic treaty, which is just going to make things, to me, that's such a huge authoritarian power grab. That's just going to be, it's going to cause so many problems.
And yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm very passionate on the health front as well. I think you're maybe a little bit more psycho with it than I am.
100%.
But I do think about it constantly, daily. I exercise daily, eat well, and so like I am very passionate about this topic. But I look at these people, and first of all, I mean, the head of the WHO is fat, so I mean, I'm not taking health advice from him. And I mean, all of our health ministers around the world look sickly and obese as well. So like, I'm not taking orders from you guys on what is good for my health when I am in better health than you.
What a sign of how broken humanity is, though, right? When you have people that are supposed to be in charge of our health and they're wildly unhealthy, and people are like, yeah, no, that's cool. No, it's not. It's such a fucking disaster. How are people not highlighting this and going, hey, look, we need someone in here that actually knows what they're doing? But it means the same thing with politicians. It's like I don't understand. Why is the world so broken? What's going on?
One thing that kind of gets glossed over here as well is like we're one of 3 of the G20 nations that employs supply management practices. The other 2 are Japan and South Korea. But with supply management, it's the government tells the farmers how much of products they can produce. And then that is the whole purpose of that. The idea is to quote unquote stabilize and be able to be in control of the pricing of the agricultural system.
Which makes no sense.
So the fact that like even liberals or NDP right now are sitting on the like in parliament and saying things like how all of the grocery prices are because of essentially corporate greed, which I'm sure some of that does factor into things for sure. But when you guys are in complete control of the supply, you guys are allowed to determine, and the whole idea is that we don't want an oversupply of things which will cause prices to come down. I'm sorry. And then your entire argument goes out the window when you're in control of that lever that could drop prices. You know, this idea of what all of these faults in Canada's systems would be required under what the WHO is talking about is that would just become a global phenomenon. Like every single government would start being practicing in their dream world, you know, whether that actually comes about, who knows, but in their dream world, they would have complete control over the supply of agriculture. And I mean, again, we already see in Canada, it's not working out well.
No, I like it. You and I are pretty well aligned. Anytime you have government intervention, you have a much bigger problem, right? Like WHO needs to fall, UN needs to fall. Basically, governments need to fall. Everybody needs to be a decent person. We can all be libertarians.
We're outlining the utopia. No, I'm not a utopia type of person. I think it's all about trade-offs. There's no such thing as solutions, right?
No free lunch, kid? No free lunch.
You just get to pick your problems. But, you know, I think, yeah, again, those problems only become worse when that decision-making power is centralized. All right, anything else you wanted to add today, brother?
That's everything.
All right, before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 6 days a week. That's blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.